We're back to Steel Battalion. Again. This familiar title screen.
Was it always red?
It turns that color over time.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. Starts white, but then kind of turns
sunsetty, yeah.
Reddish gradient. But yeah, we're back. This is the start of the promised second campaign of Steel Battalion, which
Remix.
I'm gonna very briefly enter the campaign menu and enlist a new pilot. Not for the purpose of this is gonna be who we're playing as, but it's gonna be like just to demonstrate something that changes with like the campaign and difficulty selection menu when you've completed Hai Shi Dao 2080 for the first time.
I thought you were going to call it Australia so you could drop a colony on it.
No, just thought because, you know, our main pilot's Borealis.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, Borealis, Australis, Northern Lights, Southern Lights, that whole thing. It basically writes itself. I've got no reason to, like, try and come up with anything else, like, fancy. Okay.
It's not like any of our other jokes have been particularly, try hard, so...
Yeah. So now we've got, like, a selection of whether we can do 2080 or 2082, even if it's for, like, a new pilot. So you could, like, start from scratch and completely skip the tutorial and first 10 missions. But Australis is going to be off doing his own thing during this campaign. We're back with, like... Assume that this is the pilot that we had started with all the way back in the very first video, as we proceed to do this shit all over again.
So just out of interest, starting a new character with the 2082 campaign, does that make it any more difficult, or are there any downsides to doing it?
I mean, like, the thing is that you obviously start with, like, 0 combat points, so you don't, you don't have, like, the extra ranks to start with, which also means you don't get access to any of, like, the 3rd gen VTs that are, like, locked behind those specific point requirements.
Right.
Yeah. I do think, though, that it's, like, you unlock the VTs that come naturally as a part of this campaign, but I don't think it's necessarily, like, it unlocks automatically the VTs you would have gotten in the first campaign.
Mm-hmm.
You still start with the Decider, obviously, because that's and the Falchion, because those are supposed to be the starter first gen VTs.
Yeah.
Showing the boombox menu one last time because during the process of the first campaign, we actually had run through all of the available songs, so we're not going to repeat those. This, however, is something that is very specific to the second campaign missions, in that we have our own squad of 2 VTs that, like, provide support for us and can issue specific orders with the 2 rightmost communication buttons, 4 and 5.
Oh, okay, so we're finally a squad leader then.
Yeah, a squad leader of dumbasses.
So squad leader then.
Yeah. And I guess we're a dumbass too, because we're taking a m-Vitzh model. Specifically, the m-Vitzh, in which its only real advantage over the previous one is that aside from some better, like, weight limit stats and other things, we don't have to deal with the monochromatic monitors.
Well, after using it last time, that's a pretty big upgrade.
Yeah.
At least you'll be able to see shit this time.
Mm-hmm. In this same old cramped first-gen era cockpit. But anyway, I said that we were not using the boombox. I kind of lied. I'm using my own music instead.
That sounds familiar.
It's the opening to Armored Trooper Votoms. The instrumental version specifically, because I'm like, for most of these missions where I can afford it, I'm gonna do, like, I'm basically gonna like treat the custom music I'm putting into these videos similarly to if I was using the boombox regular, where it's just the one song that will loop eventually. Hence why I went with the instrumental version of Destiny of the Flame, which is the name of the opening.
I need to watch more Votoms at some point.
It's so good. It's like, that to me is like the way more quintessential real robot anime than like Universal-centric Gundam. Because it's like... Because obviously, like, not to like kind of discredit like Gundam's appearance, just because like that was the thing that kicked off the whole real robot craze initially. But Votoms, like, not only takes it further, but I feel is way more important to watch if you have even the slightest interest in mecha video games, because it's sort of like mechanics and rule sets for how the units kind of work in Votoms has a lot of carryover to stuff like Front Mission or Old Armored Core, for instance.
I remember there was one of the... I want to say it was something like Battletech. Based a lot of its rules and setting off Votoms back in the day.
Yeah, that game was Heavy Gear.
Heavy Gear, that was it.
Yeah, I remember because of how like I spent a good amount of time both playing and struggling to get it working on modern PCs. The Heavy Gear 2 game that came out like in '99 and is like really amazing as far as like how well they like managed to translate those systems into like a PC-centric mech simulator, and without it feeling like another mech warrior. You know, it felt sufficiently different.
I think it was because I mean I'd only played the first one, but it had much more of a sense of speed compared to Mech Warrior. Because the Mech Warrior games back then were stomp, stomp, stomp. Whereas Heavy Gear, you know, when you went above a certain speed, you just deployed wheels.
Yeah, exactly. Like you're dealing with the mecha that are like in the 4 to 5 meter range in terms of height.
Yeah, more realistic, for want of a better term.
Also very fragile. But yeah. Anyway, as you can obviously see, this is literally like the exact same mission as Mission 1 in the first campaign, just at nighttime. At least one thing I'm doing different for this is that I am taking more time to try and get rid of the turrets on like these big tower installations, which is why like I'm showing off the 4A recoilless launcher, because... Oh yeah, and occasionally your squad mates, when they're taking a beating because they can't seem to navigate for shit, they'll like start calling you on your comms.
Help!
You can ignore them technically, but you are gonna have to deal with like that constant beep on like the tuner dial. But yeah, the 4A, like the reason I'm using it here is because I'd already shown off the 77 version, which has like contact fuses in the rockets, which is how it makes it a bit more viable when used in VT combat, because, you know, they move around, but as long as they're within close enough range, the fuses will detonate without needing to directly collide.
Yeah.
But these towers are not moving anywhere, so we can use the 4A for some of these. Admittedly, though, because like this mission and the one right after are ones that absolutely could have gone a lot faster, even with the units that I decided to go with. But the problem with that was just that I was trying to like show things a bit differently to kind of differentiate from the last campaign's versions of these missions. But also, this was during a time where like I had just come off of like replaying the campaign mode with like a Quasar multiple times, so I was way too accustomed to the benefits of 3rd gen VTs that it was a bit rough trying to go back to these old dinky 1st gen units.
Yes, benefits such as being able to do anything.
No, this can still do things. It doesn't have like things like, you know, being able to change the targeting system to either fire at the last known position or in the position it's leading in, or override, or yeah.
Yeah.
Also, like, stuff like the Prominence and the Quasar, you know, they have rail guns. It's real hard to beat a rail gun.
I was gonna say, for such an old game, the night fire effects are still pretty good.
Yeah.
Surprisingly so.
There's very impressive, like, use of lighting that goes on with this game. That's obviously a whole lot more noticeable when you're in these sort of nighttime sections, and it lets you better appreciate the explosions and, like, the flash from, like, when shots are fired from weapons.
Muzzle flash, yeah.
Mm-hmm. I will say that, like, for as limited as it is going back to first-gen VTs, it's still hard to, like, not appreciate, like, the mechanism behind the whole cockpit, just because it's the first one you deal with, and it's, like, it does such a good job of, like, selling you on, like, the whole simulation that the game's going for, you know?
Yeah.
It makes it feel appropriately cramped. There's a lot of very mechanical and analog, like, mechanisms and instruments to kind of give you your info.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of the cockpits from a show like Gasaraki, because in that it was the mechs in that were much more heavy, hard military style.
Right.
And I remember them being incredibly cramped, and the pilots having big, almost like virtual reality style helmets.
Yeah. Similarly, also like Votoms.
Yep.
Which also reminds me of how I think there was, like, some, like, amusement center in Odaiba that has like a bunch of VR attractions, and one of them was actually for, like, a Votoms, like, 1v1, like, arena battling game, which was
nice.
Also, like, another instance of, like, you think about the idea of Votoms VR, that is surprisingly still very accurate to what the show is in terms of, like, how the ATs are piloted.
And then this one guy shows up with a Nerf rifle and is like, nah, I can take him.
Yep, first mission. Again, it very much could have gone a whole lot faster, considering it was the exact same parameters of having to remove 75% of, like, or not 75, just 70% of the enemy forces. I can at least say that the next mission, though, even though it's in the same environment as Mission 2, it is a much more, like, different objective. That said, it's still going to take a while because it is probably me performing at my worst, but you'll know when you see it.